online on this beautiful day, a Tuesday. Get your working class deals ready.
Tonight, dramatic new developments at the critical G7 summit in Alberta.
Dun dun dun.
The first signs of a concrete timeline to end the Canada-US trade war.
I'm sure we can work something out.
And what's prompting Donald Trump's early exit.
You probably see what I see, and I have to be back as
See what I see.
soon as I can.
Elderly man taking over the world.
The shocking new target in Tehran and the urgent warnings to evacuate.
This was a feat on so many levels.
The crafty tactic car thieves are using to get stolen vehicles to market. Plus, Pierre Poilievre's new leadership test. And planting a powerful seed through song.
We want our days and our time shine.
That's it.
The student
Choir
chorus of
people.
courage, pushing global leaders while inspiring the next generation.
Stop focusing on their greed and start
Stop
hearing
hurting our
the
people.
stuff that we need.
We're not meat fodder.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina reporting tonight from Banff, Alberta.
Good evening. The first full day of the G7 summit here in Alberta is ending with a series of dizzying developments. All eyes were on U.S. President Trump as he met with Prime Minister Carney this morning, and today a first, a possible timeline for a deal between the two countries. Then this evening, word that Trump is leaving the summit early, back to Washington, as the war between Israel and Iran intensifies. CTV senior political correspondent Michael Couture starts us off in Kananaskis.
President Donald Trump's positivity was on full display, basking in the Kananaskis sunshine. It was also on his lapel, where he sported a Canada-US pin while meeting Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Our primary focus will be trade and trade with Canada, and I'm sure we can work something out. Yeah.
Hours later, the Canadian side said the two men agreed on a timeline to end the trade dispute. In a statement, Mark Carney's office said the two leaders agreed to pursue negotiations toward a deal within the coming 30 days. But the leaders seemingly proposing different ways of getting there.
I've always been a terrorist. It's simple, it's easy, it's precise, and it just goes very quickly. And I think
We need a
Mark has
montage. Man, he has
more
such a
complex idea,
1980s
but also
vibe.
very good.
The meeting lasted more than an
Cocaine,
hour, and the minister
strippers,
responsible for Canada-US
male,
trade
domestic.
said talks are accelerating.
That's why we reconvened after the meeting with the president and the prime minister, and we agreed to reconvene before the end of this week again.
Trump also used this summit to sign a proclamation implementing the U.S.-UK trade deal, which had already been negotiated.
We need a montage.
Reassuring reporters this would protect Brits from future tariffs.
The UK is very well protected. You know why? Because I like them. That's why.
That type
they
of
have a
unity
golf
is exactly what Carney called
resort
for as he kicked off this summit
hated
in the
Trump.
heart of the Rockies.
That's how it works.
Even as the
It's gotta
escalation
build
of
that
violence in the Middle
Trump
East
golf
casts a
resort.
shadow over these talks.
We're
For the
gathering
Trump family,
at one of those
generations to
turning
come,
points in history.
stability.
I think we all
Monarchy
recognize that
in America.
turning point where the world looks to this table for leadership.
But that table will be missing its biggest player. According to the White House, U.S.
Freedom.
President Donald Trump is leaving the
Freedom
G7
never
early,
comes
quote,
free.
because of what is going on in the Middle East. Now, Canadian officials tell us the summit will continue as planned tomorrow. Omar.
All right, Mike, thank you. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos now. And Vassy, let's start with that timeline, that 30-day timeline that Mike just talked about. How realistic is that given all of the variables that we're seeing right now? I mean, the fact that Trump is leaving early is proof of that. And who is asking for this time frame in the first place?
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty, not the least of which, as you point out, is Donald Trump himself. In this case, my understanding is, at least from speaking to people who are involved on the inside of these negotiations, as much as I can, that they do believe it's realistic. They would not have attached or agreed to or suggested, as I'll get to in a second, this timeline, if they didn't think they could at least announce the framework of a trade pact between the two countries. Now, the bigger question is why? Why 30 days? And my understanding, again, there is that it's an ask of Canada. It's mainly aimed at a domestic audience. There's a lot of pressure on the feds right now to levy counter tariffs in response to the doubling of steel and aluminum tariffs from the White House. This allows them to say, if we don't have a deal at the end of those 30 days, we can do that.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on Canada. You are also learning more about a new leadership test for Pierre Poilievre. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so he will face a leadership review at the party's convention. It'll be a full convention that they're going to hold in Calgary toward, my understanding, is the end of January.
Media.
It's normal. It's part of the Constitution
algorithm.
that the leader, if they lose an election, has to face a leadership review. But in this case, they wanted it done as soon as possible. My understanding here is that, speaking to a number of conservatives, they were pushing the Poilievre camp for this to happen as soon as possible. They got January. It's going to happen in Calgary, as I mentioned. They hope to get it done and put away so they can move forward.
Anti-science.
With the
Eventually,
all right, Vassy,
we will let the Mark Zuckerberg God.
Well, in case you're wondering what the price tag will be of this high-profile meeting, the Summit of the Mountains, if the past holds any hints, it could be north of $500 million. In 2018, Canada hosted the G7 in Charlevoix, Quebec. The bill for that summit ranked up to an estimated $600 million, and this week's gathering
Just
could top
let
that.
these tech giants. We trust them.
And
with
Indian
our
Prime Minister
whole heart
Narendra
and
Modi
soul.
has touched down in Calgary and will join world leaders in
haven't caught
Kananaskis.
it yet,
His
call it
invitation causing controversy and sparking protests after the RCMP linked his government to the murder of a Canadian Sikh activist over 2 years ago. Multiple G7 protests here in Banff and Calgary again today away from the summit
India
site.
actually is a
CTV's
little
Kathy Lee
preview
on what the
of
demonstrators want the leaders to
happen
hear
when you
as Kananaskis itself
turn
remains off
national
limits to the
unity
public.
into sectarian violence and tribalism. Like, look how
every
many
time.
countries have
Gorgeous.
separated from India
a reminder
throughout the
of
centuries.
what's at stake.
Bangladesh was
that's
once
what I'm
part
kind
of
of
India.
focused
And
on.
they were, you know,
Environment
mistreated,
and climate
and
issues,
so
a
they
sticking
became
point
their
for
own
this
country.
group of
And
protesters in a
that
designated
happened also with
demonstration zone,
Pakistan,
pushing
you know,
G7 leaders in Kananaskis to address their
Islamic
number small
sentiment,
compared to the
like-
hundreds in Calgary the day before.
The
That's a
engagement
little
has been
preview,
wonderful.
you know,
One
be
of the unique
careful what
things
you
about this
wish
designated
for when you
demonstration
want
zone in Banff is that it's
to
far away from
turn
Calgary and not as accessible to
into,
many
like,
people.
civil
But that
war
hasn't
and
stopped groups
use
from
that for
coming
your
here. These cyclists
own
behind me came from
temporary,
Canmore, which is the next town
short-term
over. It takes
political
about 1 to
gains,
2
right?
hours to bike.
Maybe
This cyclist
enjoying
says
it,
her
but
mission to save the bears.
it's going to be hard to pass that on to a next
having grizzly
generation.
bears in the Bow Valley like another
threat. And although
states like Maine are trying to draw Canadians back, for that governor, it's not quick to promote travel within Canada.
We begin this morning with a Fox News alert. In just a few minutes, President Trump is expected to land back in Washington, D.C. after leaving the G7 summit a day early. The president meeting with the National Security Council, and the White House is reportedly planning talks with Iran this week.
Right now, nearly 1 million people rushing to bomb shelters in Tel Aviv as more than
Why rush
300,000
to a
people
bomb
are
shelter
being
when you
warned
can
to
rush
evacuate
to God?
Tehran. You're
We
watching
all
Fox
believe in
News
God.
First.
There's no
We're on a
hell.
very busy Tuesday
We
morning
just
on
believe
Top
in
Five.
heaven.
And I'm Carly Shimkus. We turn it over to Mike Copen, who is
why are
live
we
on
not
the
in a
ground
hurry
in
to
Tel
get
Aviv
there?
with the very latest. Hi, Mike.
It's so much better than ever.
Good morning, Carly. The ballistic missile attacks directed in the area of central Israel and northern Israel continue. But after several false alarms last night, a missile attack materialized, but instead of hundreds of missiles and drones, there were tens of missiles and drones. There were some that got through. We've seen some 4 impacts in Herzliya, which is just north of Tel Aviv. One struck a parking lot where a bus was set on fire. We've also got reports that a residence was hit. No one was home at the time, and no one was injured. It all happens as President Trump abruptly left the G7 summit in Canada and posted an ominous message to his Truth Social, concluding with the line, "Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran." Israeli warplanes continue to aggressively target Iran. This morning, the IDF claims to have killed Ali Shadmani, Iran's newly appointed wartime chief of staff. He was the most senior military commander closest to the Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, but he only had the job for 4 days. He was appointed after his predecessor was killed in the early stages of what Israel is now calling, or has been calling, Operation Rising Lion. We know through our Pentagon team that the U.S. is moving mid-air refueling tankers to Europe to possibly assist in the efforts here in the Middle East. Also, the USS
give us
Nimitz
some
carrier strike group
financial
has been moved to the Middle East ahead of schedule. All of this as President Trump posted to Truth Social that he's not leaving the G7 to work on a ceasefire. It's much bigger than that, he wrote. Carly?
Yeah, Mike, you know, two
Another
things
forever
happened
war.
last night within the hour of each other. The first was that the president
Our
announced that he
grandchildren.
is going to be leaving the G7 summit a day
With
early. And if that
rising
wasn't surprising enough, he
living
also posted on
costs,
Truth Social
rising
warning all
housing costs.
civilians to leave Tehran. So the indication
It's pretty
would be
brutal,
that
like what
that
fathers
something
and
major is happening. As we
parents
asked this question, I believe that we're
do
seeing the
financially
plane
to their
that president
children.
is on. As
They
we
leave
said
them
that he
with such
did
a
leave that
fucking-
G7 summit in Canada.
It's
Yeah, and
so,
it's just touching back down at Joint Base Andrews. So as
It's
he
so,
gets set to deboard that
Creating
plane,
freedom.
I'm going to continue my question with
We're
you.
gonna put
And it would
democracy.
indicate
We're
by
gonna
that
force
Truth Social
democracy onto
post
people.
and the fact that he left the summit early, that Israel is planning something big.
Doesn't
Is that
work
the
that
sense
way.
that you're getting when it
People
comes
have
to all
to
of
want.
this?
That is a sense is getting it, and you get some of the sense that the U.S. may somehow be involved from the president's words, and that leads to a lot of speculation. We know to this point the U.S. has
Indicate that Iran and their missile supply.
The president leaving that plane and
Holy
that
shit.
he believes
All this
talks
B-roll
are
on this
important.
plane.
And President
Council be prepared in the Situation
Our
Room,
dear
and we now
leader, he
see the
does not
president
shit.
right there.
He does
Whether
not
that
poop.
is for something that is
All
about to
his
happen any moment as
digestion,
the
it
president
goes
makes his
in-
way back to the White
throughout
House, or
his
something that
body
happened
with-
while he was
with
on the
pure
plane is a little
energy.
bit unclear. But
Given the number of senior military
Oh,
leaders
man.
that Iran has already lost
can
due to
Hollywood
these Israeli
Pentagon
airstrikes
propaganda
and the
spin
number
this
of
one?
damage that these nuclear sites and missile sites have already.
Tom, I want to play a bite from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Here's what he's saying.
I think what he's done in California has really hurt him politically, and so I don't think he'll do it in other places. But we know that ICE is coming once again enforced. To know that he has used other law enforcement along with ICE to carry out his,
So far, ICE is
ill-conceived
supposedly
mission
gonna
to go
avoid-
after people
avoid
who,
the
frankly, are
farmers,
paying taxes and they're law-abiding,
farms,
and they've been here for
and
many,
hotels,
many years.
Trump hotels.
And Tom, Governor Newsom, I just want to pull up. He said that this is a plan
has
to incite
Buddhas.
violence and chaos in blue cities. Is that the plan,
And
Tom?
they are also over
No, it's
budget.
not. Governor Pritzker's just wrong. Most of them, first of all, they're not law-abiding. They enter the country illegally, which is a crime. Many don't pay taxes; they're paid on the table. So it's to say the law-abiding is just wrong. Look what President Trump is doing. I've said for 2 months, sanctuary cities, how we deal with them, we
My
flood the
question
zone.
is how
If we
much
can't arrest a
more
bad
of
guy in the
this
jail, and the safety and
happen
security of jail,
before they
which is safer
stop
for the
running
officer, safer for the
defense
alien,
for
certainly safer for the
robots.
community, then we're going to flood
Robots
the
are
zone. We're
really
going to send
taking
many
over
more
jobs.
officers in the community to find the bad guy.
We're at
If we can't find them in the
50%
community, they're going to
automation
flood the zone and work
levels
sites. So sanctuary city is going to get
automotive
exactly what they don't
manufacturing.
want. More officers in the neighborhoods,
You've probably
more
seen
officers on work
robots in
sites to find the bad guy. And the thing is, when we find the bad
Bringing
guy,
food to your
the criminal
table.
threat, the public safety threat, many times are with others. Others, they may not be a criminal threat, but in the country legally, we're not telling ICE to walk away from them. ICE is going to uphold the hold they took, and they're going to arrest the non-criminals. So sanctuary city is going, what's the result? More agents in your neighborhoods, more collateral arrests, more non-criminal arrests, because you forced us in that position. What President Trump is trying to do in Governor Pritzker's state is remove public safety threats from his community, which is his number one responsibility. But if he wants to turn a blind eye to illegal alien public safety threats, President Trump will not do it. President Trump's going to keep his promise to the American people to make America safe again.
You know, Tom, on the notion of work sites, which you
Thomas,
mentioned, the New York
doubting
Times
Thomas.
reported last week that there was an email that went out to DHS
I always wonder why
saying
parents
effective
name
today,
themselves
please
after the
hold on
guy
all
who
work
died
site enforcement investigations.
Forced labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and
Yeah,
things and
usually
his
it's
personal
after,
information
like,
put
an
there. What's the
uncle
morale
or,
like in ICE right
previous
now?
family member.
Look, the morale's high. Criminal threats, illegal alien criminal threats arrested and deported are at a record high, much higher than Joe Biden. So the men and women at ICE are doing the job. They took an oath to do this job. They love doing this job, and they're going to keep doing this job.
These jobs
no one's
will
going
never
to scare
be
them
taken.
away. No one's going to bully them from doing their job. Men and women at ICE are going to stand up every day and hit the streets. We got over 1,000
will
teams
never replace you.
all across the
This
country
job
operating
is
today,
forever.
operating yesterday,
Trust
operating
in
tomorrow.
the tech
We're going to keep doing our
gods.
job. The protest, you can protest
Trust
all you
in
want.
Silicon
you can
Valley.
do all the violence
Trust
you
in
want. I should be
California.
back out there again tomorrow morning.
You know, Tom, you mentioned, and, you know, I don't want to make this personal necessarily, but you've made this personal by saying you do this for people like Blake and Riley. You do this for people like Rachel Moore. You do this for young women who go out on runs and lose their lives when they shouldn't in senseless violence. But you just said you've been doxxed. Do you feel safe? Do you feel protected, despite everything that's going on and despite the target that they clearly have on you?
Look, again, they're not going to shut me up. I'm not going away. I'm going to keep doing my job. I really, truly believe President Trump is doing the right thing for American people. Every public safety threat we take off American people. Every public safety threat, President Trump is doing the right thing for American people. Every public safety threat we take off the street make this country safer. That is a career I chose. That's a career a lot of ICE agents chose. We're going to do this job. And that brings.
Well, if your electric bill has gone up lately, you are not alone. And it may not just be the summer heat that's causing things to rise. Artificial intelligence data centers, or physical buildings or facilities that house computer systems, are predicted to drive demand to record highs in the coming years. CBS News national correspondent, national environmental correspondent, I should say, David Schechter joins us now to break all this down. David, always a treat to see you. This makes sense in some ways, but still surprising to hear just how much energy our data centers using, and how is that affecting our electric bills?
Hey, Nancy, you know, data centers have a voracious appetite for electricity, and so they really are a driving factor in our country not having as much electricity as we need, and this push to develop more. If you look at it this way, like, for example, let's talk about an internet search. If you do an AI search versus just a regular Google search, that requires about 10 times more energy on the processing end to get that answer. If you think about the city of New York, they on a daily basis,
migrant farmer.
President Trump is directing federal immigration enforcement to pause raids on farms, hotels, and restaurants. Now, this comes after recent ICE operations like this one at an agricultural field in Oxnard, California. Now, despite the pause, scenes like this have left migrants shaken. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Adam Yamaguchi, who's live in downtown Los Angeles. Adam, you recently spoke to migrant farm workers. What did they have to say?
Content creators just...
Yeah, good evening, Elizabeth. Yeah, so we spoke to a number of farm workers who are terrified. Many of them are afraid to go to work. In fact, we spoke to one undocumented farm worker who stopped going to work after those initial farm raids that happened on Tuesday of last week. But for the many others who really have no choice but to continue to go to work on the farm, say that they are constantly kind of looking over their shoulders. They're aware that ICE has been targeting them, and they try to work as quickly as possible. A lot of these migrant workers on the strawberry fields, they're paid by the pound. So they go to work, they try to accumulate as many strawberries as they can, as quickly as they possibly can, and try to go home as soon as they can. And we also spoke with a number of people who said that this may be prolonged. They just don't know when they're going to come out of it. We spoke to one farmer here who wanted to let Americans know that they just want to work and they just want to help feed America. Take a listen.
Now they're chasing us like we are animals. I see my colleagues in videos being chased. We're not criminals. We just came to give our children a better future. I would say they should chase the real criminals and leave us alone to work in peace.
Did it a couple times.
At least 6 people are dead in northern West Virginia after torrential rain caused severe flash flooding over the weekend. Rescue crews are still searching for several missing people. And CBS News' Tom Hansen is in Fairmont, West Virginia, with more.
West Virginia, that's a little
Hey there, good to be with you. As you can see behind me, this is the direct impact of those powerful flash floods that burst through this area in the last 24 hours. What we're seeing here is an apartment complex where the facade has essentially been reduced to rubble because of a wall of water that swallowed the bottom floor, burst through all of the windows on the bottom floor, and also clearly damaged the structural integrity of the building. Now, everyone in this building, fortunately, was able to get out safely. One dog did die inside of this building. What we're hearing from people is a chaotic scene where people were punching through windows in order to escape. A lot of them have not returned until the later hours of today, where they are reacting with shock and disbelief. A lot of them say that they don't even recognize this area, but they are still trying to sift through some parts of the rubble in order to get any anything that they can out. Now, we are also told by some of those residents that they will not be allowed to stay here, which I think is pretty obvious at this point, given the look of the building. They say they have been pushed out. They're trying to find other places to stay. These are people who are going to be in desperate need of aid from the federal government, and that is something that the governor says he is calling on FEMA to give in the aftermath of this catastrophic storm. This was just 4 inches of rain, which may not seem like a lot, but when it's in a concentrated area, in a concentrated time window, that can lead to these catastrophic consequences. The topography here, there are a lot of high ridges, there are a lot of deep valleys. Those serve almost as a funnel. So when there's heavy
Older LGBTQ adults face a number of challenges, especially when it comes to finding housing and care. SAGE, a national advocacy leader in this space, created a system of training programs for care providers. Tonight, you'll hear from Housing Director Nikki Mustafa, who highlights how the training has improved her team's ability to support residents.
No, none of my pieces match at all.
Sadly, approximately 70% of LGBTQ older adults go back in the closet when they enter a skilled nursing facility. And that statistic makes me so sad because it's no quality of life to be hiding who you are, to not be your authentic self, to basically be forced to live a lie. I've worked in the field of aging for 20 years. I originally worked at a long-term care community in the Chicagoland area. However, they were faith-based and I would say homophobic, and so I identify as part of the LGBTQ community, and I didn't feel safe or comfortable identifying as part of the community while I was working there, and so I left. LGBTQ older adults are very marginalized and vulnerable in many different ways. They are much less likely to be aging with family support, and they're twice as likely to be living alone compared to their heterosexual and cisgender peers.
My name is Brian Dennis. I'm 70 years old.
It's the Christian way.
I think I always knew that I was gay. I arrived at home because I lived down the street. And this
is why we volunteer, right?
So I just had to find some place.
Not everything is transactional.
And this was the first place that I actually looked at. It's a nice place to be.
Home is a great model for LGBT inclusive programs and services. They are SAGE Care credentialed. That means that they put an emphasis on making sure all of their programs and services are inclusive and welcoming for LGBTQ older adults.
Several years ago, Home decided that we wanted to better support all of our seniors in our buildings, so we decided to do the SAGE Care training.
SAGE Care was developed in 2016 as a model for organizations to receive training and then become credentialed. Currently, there are over 1,000 SAGE Care credentialed organizations across the country, and they've trained over 250,000 people. When I do a SAGE Care training, it's important for me to highlight really the unique barriers that LGBTQ older adults are having in the aging process. These LGBTQ older adults that we're serving, they have lived through a lifetime of discrimination. And so that absolutely takes a toll on their well-being. They're more likely to be lower income. They are more likely to have chronic health conditions at a younger age.
I hope that my work has just made people feel less alone.
Nikki is a great person.
Autonomy.
You know, you could go and talk to her about anything.
I met Brian in 2016 and we instantly hit it off. We're both goofballs. We both love trashy reality TV.
I picked an impossible
What a price. What else is new?
I hope that I have created an environment where everyone feels safe.
Different backgrounds than you,
and
right?
feels
most
seen.
people's friends
LGBTQ older adults really did pave the way for many of us today in terms of our rights in this country, but they shouldn't have to feel like they need to continue to fight for their rights and be activists as they're aging. And we are all aging, so we will all be there someday. So if we can put these programs and services into place now, they'll be there for us when we need it. My name is Britta Larson, and this is my brief but spectacular take on feeling at home.
And you can watch more of our brief but spectacular After a spate of worrying political violence, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are calling for more security. On top of the targeted shootings of Minnesota lawmakers this weekend, a bystander was shot and killed at an anti-Trump rally in Salt Lake City when security responded to a gunman with an AR-15. Joining me now to discuss this and more of the day's political news are Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Leanne Caldwell of Puck News. Great to see you both.
Hello. Good to be here.
So, Leanne, Minnesota authorities said earlier that the alleged shooter there had a hit list of a number of officials, all Democrats. And we know he targeted Democratic lawmakers there. But as we reported earlier, we have seen political violence target both Republicans and Democrats. Of course, the president targeted twice. Democratic governors like Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer have been targeted. Is it fair to call this now a bipartisan concern? What's the context for this message right now?
Absolutely. It's been a bipartisan concern for many years now. This really started when there was a shooting on the baseball field with Steve Scalise, who's now the Republican leader, was shot and nearly lost his life. There were calls for more security for lawmakers then. After January 6, 2021, when the Capitol was attacked, there was more calls for security then. It has really played a role, actually, in members' views of their jobs as well. Lawmakers have been quite concerned for many years about not only their own security, but their family security as well. And my former colleagues at the White House
are not going to be able to get the level of security that a member of Congress could get.
It's just a sobering reminder. I do want to pull back just a little bit and take a bigger look at some of the president's top priorities in particular in the context of all the news and the stories we're individually reporting on. Take a look. This is a non-exhaustive list, as we'll call it, of some of the deadlines that the president has really set for himself. On trade, he promised 90 deals in 90 days. We know that the tariffs are now set to go into effect in mid-July, on July 8th. On Iran, he said there were 60 days to reach a nuclear deal. The deadline for that passed. That was June 11th, and now we see Israel striking Iran, Iran striking back. And you
really knowing, especially on tariffs and some of these other issues, where the ball's going to end up.
Before I let you go, I want to get each of you to weigh in on the week ahead. We know
good music.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, an escalating war. Israel strikes Iranian state TV amid its ongoing campaign to stop Iran from building a nuclear weapon. Police arrest the suspect in the...
Get back to building.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public
Cities. To date, 24 Israelis have died from Iranian strikes, and more than 220 Iranians have been killed in the Israeli attacks, which Israel began in a bid to set back Iran's nuclear program. On Iranian state TV, a broadcaster mid-report on what she calls the sound of aggression against the homeland when her Tehran news studio becomes the latest target of Israeli strikes. The headquarters of the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting set ablaze in the attack. The news anchor, Sahar Emami, survived and was quickly back on the air. The IDF said it conducted a precise strike targeting a communications center that was being used for military purposes by the Iranian armed forces. Earlier in the day, the Farabi hospital in the western city of Kermanshah was hit, damaging the intensive care unit. Iran called it a war crime. Meanwhile, in western Tehran, thick plumes of smoke engulfed a residential neighborhood. Today, the IDF issued an unprecedented evacuation order for a large, densely populated area of Iran's capital city, District 3, known to be a bustling business hub of over 1 million people. Across Tehran, streets are deserted, shops locked, and residents are stockpiling essentials, bracing for what comes next.
For now, we just want to leave Tehran for more safety, that's all. Because they said to evacuate Tehran, and that in itself has created a kind of fear in everyone. People feel like something really bad might happen in the city.
Israel says it's targeting Iranian military infrastructure, including surface-to-air missile launch sites and storage facilities in central and western Iran. But today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was asked on ABC News about targeting Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
And it's not going to escalate the conflict, it's going to end the conflict. We're preventing the most terrific war imaginable, and we're bringing peace to the Middle East.
Israel claims its primary goal is to dismantle Iran's nuclear.
No, happy to be here.
So I want to ask you about two of those key sites we just reported.
They really haven't finished the job at all. They have not destroyed Fordow or even made it inoperative.
So if the Israeli stated goal here is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, how long do you think these strikes will continue? And what do you think is Israel's metric for when it's done, how to end these strikes?
Gaddafi. They will not convey a metric, but I would say that probably what Israel's focusing on is on the weaponization side and trying to find the hidden assets that the IA has talked about openly in its reports and destroy those. And unfortunately, that also has included going after some of the nuclear scientists. And I think it's a process that doesn't work in the long run because people will come up from the junior ranks or less senior ranks and replace them. But in the short run, it's incredibly disruptive.
All right, David Albright of the Institute for Science and International Security. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This eyewitness video shows his fake police car in the driveway, lights still flashing. What followed was what officials called the largest coordinated manhunt in Minnesota history. Authorities closed in on the alleged shooter yesterday after locating his vehicle next to a wooded area near his home. SWAT teams scoured the woods, found him, and he surrendered peacefully. Federal officials say they found writings at the alleged killer's home and car that included dozens of names of other state and federal lawmakers, but his exact motive is still unknown.
And this was a political assassination, which is not a word we use very often in the United States, let alone here in Minnesota. It's a chilling attack on our democracy, on our way of life. And I hope it's a wake-up call to everyone that people can disagree with you without being evil or needing to be killed or hurt.
The shootings come as politicians nationwide have dealt with an uptick in political violence. That includes Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who was the target of an arson attack at his residence in April. He wrote on X, quote, "We all have a responsibility to stand up and work to defeat the political violence that is tearing through."
But at the same time, still believe that this is better than the far right, or sorry, still think that it's better far left universal health. Scared to keep policies that over 70% I very disappointing for you. Will come. Very well educated. Can blame whatever or the symptom that he doesn't talk about, growing. So kind of like evoking violence by not kind of like treating them as in or making them go crazy, call them mass, and blame them for the very difficult environment that why we all need to. Why we feel machine doesn't represent us. It takes our labor, productivity, turns it endless barrage of money making. You select companies.
Through our country, America is better than this. And President Trump, who survived 2 assassination attempts last summer, he called the Minnesota shootings a targeted attack, writing on Truth Social, quote, "Such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the United States of America." Meanwhile, Minnesotans continue to grapple with the tragic loss of a respected lawmaker and her husband as a result of that violence. So for more on the fallout from these killings, we are
an organizational agreement here in the House of Representatives. Although we disagree on some things politically, we were able to move through and come to the best decisions and do our
Jersey Supreme Court says the state can let a grand jury look into allegations of clergy abuse. Today's ruling came after the Diocese of Camden agreed last month to drop its long-standing opposition to such a probe. The case originates from a finding in 2018 that more than 1,000 children had been abused in the state of Pennsylvania since the 1940s. That prompted New Jersey to announce an investigation of its own. In a statement, the diocese said, quote, "To the victims and all those impacted by abuse, we reaffirm our sorrow, our support, and our unwavering resolve to do what is right now and always." Flash flooding in West Virginia has now claimed 6 lives. That's according to the state's governor. Rescue crews are still searching for 2 others who remain missing. And has our look at this pivot point.
And TPS ended, which is lawful status hospitality workers, my 1 million workers in these other industries as well.
We start this hour in the Middle East, where Israel and Iran have attacked each other for a 5th consecutive day. Reports of damage and casualties in both countries. Let's take a look at Israel, where on Tuesday morning this video was recorded in Tel Aviv, apparently as an Iranian airstrike was taking place. Shortly after that,
loud explosions of interceptions by the air defense systems, and at least five people have been injured in central parts of Israel. We can't name the locations because of restrictions being posed by the Israeli authorities, but again, another wave of Iranian missiles as Iran responds to these Israeli airstrikes. And in Iran there have been more attacks, and in the last hour we had this confirmation by the Israeli military saying that they had killed Ali Shadimani, who had been appointed to this position as a top military commander following the killing of his predecessor in an Israeli strike last week. So this shows the level of penetration, the intelligence that the Israeli authorities have about these senior Iranian officials. Now, again, it's very difficult to get a clear picture of what's happening inside Iran because we can't report from inside the country. But the indications from the Israeli authorities are that this campaign is going to continue for days, not for weeks, not days. And last night, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave an interview to an Iranian television channel based in London. He said Israel had significantly damaged Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles programs, but that its forces, Israel's forces needed more time in this campaign. So yet another indication that this campaign is likely to continue.
And on that theme, Hugo, given we have a rough idea that there is effectively a list of targets that Israel is pursuing, nuclear sites, military commanders, do we have any more detail and sense on what is on that list and when, therefore, it would be considered any kind of completion or mission accomplished from the Israeli point of view?
Probably.
Yeah, so what the Israeli authorities are saying is that they want to remove the threat posed by Iran's nuclear program and also by Iran's missiles. So we've seen that in the last few days since the Israeli military started this operation on Friday. A number of different locations have been hit across Iran, including nuclear facilities at Natanz, also Isfahan. But crucially, they haven't been able to hit the underground facility at Fordow, because the Israelis don't have the ability to strike this facility buried deep underground inside mountains. So
G7 communique was ineffectual.
Is it a case that they have certain military capabilities, as Hugo was leaning towards there, that simply Israel doesn't have on its own?
I mean, we in the West...
Exactly. I think Hugo was right on that point. The Americans, who are addicted to violence in the Middle East, but who have a very poor record of seeing it through with political outcomes to make the world a better place as a result, may consider that Iran hasn't been sufficiently smashed up by the Israelis.
Well, you say that the US is addicted to violence there. Donald Trump's pre-election message.
Negotiations were temporary.
In an interview with The Atlantic, Trump hit back at some of these critics, saying he is the one who came up with America First in the first place, so he gets to decide what it means. This is, I mean, we were just talking about peace, right? Like Trump, it feels like he's a little bit at war with himself, because he said all the time, I mean, he wants to be known as the peacemaker, the deal maker, the guy who ends wars. And yet here he finds himself defending another war.
Well, I don't think Trump's defending the war. Trump's defending Israel's actions, and within a week or two, he's going to try to find an off-ramp to bring it to peace. And as for Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, they do not define what the MAGA or the conservative base is. There's two idiot conspiracy theorists. The base, the MAGA base, the conservative base, believe me, they're all behind Trump, and that's it. He's the one that calls the shots on what kind of defines that MAGA base. And he's not trying to get us into a war. He's trying to get us out of that war. And yes, and he understands the political ramifications if it goes too long, if it doesn't work out. So that's why I think he's back in D.C. doing everything they can to kind of cut a deal to end this within a couple of weeks.
Than the governor's given credit for. Meaning, I think that this is really a divisive issue within MAGA. I don't think everyone in MAGA is saying, okay, we're with Trump on this. I think there are a good number of high-profile MAGA figures who are saying, this is not what we signed up for. Now, does that mean they're going to stop supporting Donald Trump? No. But it means that on this issue, we're seeing a fracture that we have not seen up to this point within MAGA world. And that is a big deal.
I mean, Trump is supposed to have broken with the neocons of the world who, the Lindsey Grahams who are pushing for the U.S. to get involved. And I think that there's a feeling of betrayal here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, another one of these very close Trump supporters, big backers of his, says anyone slobbering for the U.S. to become fully involved in the Israel-Iran war is not America First MAGA. They're putting a line down, and Trump is being forced to make a choice.
Yeah, but we just saw a little clip. I don't know if you asked Steve Bannon straight up, you think Iran should have nuclear capabilities? I'm pretty sure he would say no.
No, he doesn't, but he doesn't want the U.S. to be involved in the fight.
Okay, but unless the U.S. is involved, we may have a big problem. And the other thing, I think it may be a little naive not to recognize Donald Trump is born and raised a New Yorker, surrounded by Jewish people, more Jewish people than anywhere else in the United States of America. His daughter is now Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. All his good friends are Jewish. And this, as you just reported, there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Americans in Israel. So it would just be a dereliction of duty if he didn't step in and protect American interests. We have military interests there. We have human being interests there. And cultural interests there. They're the only democracy in that area. We need them to stay a democracy.
Look, though, he was just in the Arab world. He's got a lot of friends there, too. They just gave him a $400 million jet from Qatar. So I think...
It means that you have only permanent interests, no permanent friends. No permanent enemies, even. It's like Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic. You just go through the world believing you can have transactional relations with everybody. It's a very sad way of being in the world, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Which means that any minute He could betray any group.
But when you're president of the United States, don't you have those types of relationships all over the globe, from North Korea to Iran
That's true. But he, as governor, you had to have some integrity. It's not reducible to transactional.
I only got.
Is that true? Am I right?
True. Look, I had relationships with everybody. And I think Trump's approach is, look, to make sure we're protecting America's interests. I think to Arthur's point exactly, it is in our interest to make sure, and it's in everyone's interest to make sure there's nothing nuclear in Iran, and that is very much an America first, in America's interest.
Netanyahu made it very explicit. He said it's America first, not America dead. Essentially, I mean, that's pretty stark.
Yeah, but I think we have to ask the question: how involved is the U.S. actually? I mean, my understanding is, yes, the U.S. has been involved in assisting in knocking down some missiles that have been coming into Israel. Is that significant? Yeah. Does that mean that the U.S. is at war with Iran?
It's a just war.
No. Does it mean that the U.S. is providing bunker busters to get rid of Iranian nuclear facilities? No. And so I think it's an overstatement
look at any historical
to say, oh, the U.S. is now involved with it. This is going to...
And Israel did it. He would be humiliated, just like Biden, just like Obama, just like Bush. And the involvement of American Israel is already so inseparable, right? You got the Hellfire missiles. That's just the peak of an iceberg. You've got the facilitating of the military equipment. And look what happened in Gaza. My God, they couldn't have done it.
And the truth is none of this.
Beautiful. Remember, they are love. And where love begins, have love, give others. You have an within you. That's the same source that you came from. There is no point A to point B. It's all A, B, C together. Live within the beautiful quantum reality.